Hey everyone, welcome to Candid Conversations with Katie and Danetha. Thanks so much for tuning in, where Katie and I have conversations about how to reach your fullest potential as a woman within the accounting profession. Today, we're going to be talking about working in a male-dominated field and how to rise above the glass ceiling that many of us may face within our career. To kick us off, Katie, I'd love to ask you your thoughts on this. Is there a glass ceiling within the accounting profession? And if so, how do we break through it?
So I think that is a super interesting question, because from my research, I found that when entering the profession, it's pretty equal on terms of men and women. And this was information that was released during 2017 by the AICPA. So it's pretty equal when we entered it. I noticed that as well when I started working at Ernst & Young. But as time goes on, the partners ratio of male to female is significantly different. So only 22% of partners are actually women, which tends, I would say, to indicate that there is somewhat of a glass ceiling for women, that it's possible to become a partner, but there's definitely some differences there. And so I found this to be really interesting because, again, this is exactly what I saw when working in public accounting. There are actually no female partners at the firm I was at. And what the research seems to believe to be true as to how can, women break through this is to have a sponsor. And the biggest difference between like a sponsor is they're not just your mentor or your coach, but rather they're your advocate and they go to bat for you. And the reason why having a formal sponsorship is so important is if you have a mentor or a coach, a lot of times you're going to pick people that are a lot like you. And so affinity bias come into place. And if we maybe aren't as assertive in what we want, we naturally gravitate towards someone else that's that way. And so whenever you put two people together that are the same, it can be very difficult for them to, as we start putting, I guess, more groups of more people together, it can be difficult for those groups to all have the same, I guess, advantage, be in the same playing field.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you brought up that term, affinity bias. Some fields will call it unconscious bias, where we gravitate towards those that are like us. And if you're in a group that's already in a position of power and you continue to only gravitate towards those that are like you, then you just continue to perpetuate
yes.
the non-diversity at the top. So that's interesting. So when your experience, was there a sponsorship program available to you?
No, we had at E&Y, we had mentors. Okay. And I guess we called them counselors, but they were a lot more like mentors, and they were formal in a sense that we didn't pick them. So you could say the affinity bias weren't there, but they weren't essentially, especially at the younger levels, they weren't really, I guess, critical in going to bat for you because you followed a standard progression. And if you were ticking off what you had to do to get to the next level, you got to the next level. Now, I can't say what it's like in terms of, 10 years down the road in your career. Maybe that relationship changes, and I'm sure there's some differences between those relationships when you compare them, someone 10 years down the road and someone who's only a few years into your career. But I did not feel like my relationship with my counselor or mentor, whatever you want to call it, had a big impact on my career. And more importantly, I didn't feel like she could have an impact on my career.
Interesting, because she wasn't in a position to affect change?
Yeah, exactly. I felt like no matter what my relationship was with her, no matter if she saw something in me that maybe someone else didn't, we were structured to climb the ladder in a certain way. And so as a female, if maybe at, year 5 or year 6, I decided to start a family, then I would just be following the ladder of someone who started a family, and it wouldn't matter if I had a different mentor or anything. That was the career path that I was on. And it's like, you can go down this track, and if you want to become a partner, you go down this track. If you want to start a family and maybe work more flexible hours, you go down this track. But you recognize, and other people talked about it that were moms, that, hey, I've been here. One lady had been there, gosh, it was coming up on 20 years. And she even said, like, I can't become partner because I've chosen this path. And she was an amazing worker. She worked all the time. She was always answering emails, but she said, I've chosen this path where I'm, working less billable hours, which I would argue she was on email just as much. I don't know how she was working less, but she said, that's just what I've accepted.
That's so fascinating how within the system it's built so that moms are completely taken out of the path of reaching the highest level. Like, it's just something that's been ingrained with us. I came across or in my personal experience, I've had a situation where I clearly saw the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. I was working on a project, and I was working alongside this gentleman who is in Silicon Valley, runs this big company, had built a successful career. And there was a situation where we were in a meeting, and myself and a guy who was the same age as me, roughly, we're about a couple years apart. We were in the same meeting, and the CEO, the older gentleman, introduced me to one of the people in the room that he felt would be someone that I should know. And he introduced me by saying, hey, this is Danetha Doe. We're partners on this project. And then left me to advocate for myself and to share my story and continue the conversation with this person, which was on the surface totally fine, right? Like, he did a great service introducing me to someone that he has rapport with, and it was all great until in that same meeting, I witnessed him introducing another gentleman to someone else that he felt would be a good fit for him. And mind you, this guy knew both of us just as well. It wasn't that he had a deeper friendship or a longer term friendship with this guy. But instead of just saying, hey, this is so-and-so, this is what he does, and then left him to fend for himself, he went on this whole spiel around how this guy who's my same age could help this other person in XYZ area. And although he may not have had a ton of experience already, like, he totally believed in his ability and his potential, and just went on and on and on, and basically created this platform for this other guy to be able to just step into an opportunity. Whereas for me, I was left to fend for myself. And that to me was the clearest clearest example of the difference between a mentor or coach versus a sponsor. And as women, we are put in that situation so often, where not only are we having to boost our own confidence because we get so many messages that we are not worthy, but then when we are put in a situation, we also have to fend for ourselves and come up with this laundry list of accolades or experiences to prove that we're worthy to be a part of this conversation. So that experience really showed me the difference between the two.
Wow, that is so powerful. And I'm sure so many listening can relate to a time that they experienced something similar. So I never, I guess, experienced something so direct, but I know when I was working at EY, we had just been promoted, and you essentially are promoted each year. Like I said, if you follow a set of guidelines and they believe that you're good enough to essentially advance to that next level. And I remember I was looking through them, and I talked to my counselor about all the things I had done, and I'd talked to my senior managers that I'd worked with and the roles that I had been performing at. And they were all like, yeah, you right now are a staff, but you have been acting as literally a manager on a lot of engagements, because I was put in a group where they had short staff, and I just kept saying yes, and I jumped up to the plate. And so I remember going through all of that, and then I had talked to multiple people, especially this one senior manager who was really amazing, and he was a great advocate for me. And I said, I want to be promoted early from staff to senior. Here's all the stuff I've done. And he's like, I totally agree, but they don't do that. And, we had a couple conversations. He's like, you know what, if you feel like, you want to try to push for this, go for it. And so I talked to multiple partners and told them, like, hey, I understand that this is not traditional, but here's all the things I've done. Here's what I'm currently doing. And this is why I think I should be promoted. And when I finally got to the top person that I had to talk to, because basically they just kept pushing me to the next person, they told me that it would be unfair to everyone else around, and what kind of message would they be sending to everyone else if they promoted me. And so to me, I felt like very alone in that, my mentor at the time, she wasn't even in on these conversations. And so here I was fending for myself, and then their only, I don't want to say excuse, but reason why they couldn't do that was because what's the message that it sends to everyone else? And I would think at some of these bigger companies, they would be looking to promote talent and not hold talent back, because what does that do to the top talent? It pushes them out.
Like it did you. It completely pushed you out. Well, and also let's take their question and answer it. Well, what does this say? It says that we are able to look outside of tradition and see an individual for the talent, the work ethic, the skill that she brings to the table, and we promote along those lines. Like, how empowering would that be for some of your peers that came in at the same time to realize, oh my gosh, if I do show up and go above and beyond, I will be rewarded for that.
Yeah. And I totally see their point of view in saying that, because they don't want to create, this view that they're favoring some people over others. But my response was actually, well, how many, of my other starting class, how many of them have come to you with this conversation? And they didn't have a response. The partner I was talking to, he didn't have a response. And if I'm reading his face, it would be none of them. And again, I totally understand not wanting to create, a view that they're favoring certain people. But like you said, you've got to empower people. And if they're, if this profession's all about helping people really achieve their best self, then we need to find ways to, push people on, give them opportunities, but reward them for taking on those opportunities. And especially as women want to say, you know what, I want to, become partner or whatever it may be. And regardless of what I am doing at home, being a mom, if I, complete this role and I do a good job at it, I should get that title. It's not, hey, I'm on flex, because what if on flex I can accomplish everything that I need to, and all my clients are happy and all my teammates are happy? That's the way to view it. It's like, what are you getting done in that time?
Absolutely. And so what are some things that a firm can do that doesn't have a sponsorship program? Because in your experience, your mentor wasn't advocating for you, maybe wasn't even in a position to truly be able to advocate for you in the way that you needed. What are some things that firms can do to create a system where you're not out there fending for yourself?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it comes back to having those discussions about with the individuals about, where they want to be in the future and how you can support them. And, if their goals are to become a certain level within the firm in a certain amount of years that maybe is irregular from the norm, it's let's see what opportunities they can take on, what clients they can bring in, where their skill set fits to help them get there. And if they don't, that's fine. But we need to start enabling people to create plans and supporting them with these plans so that they can achieve their dreams rather than the traditional timeline, because everyone works at different paces. Everyone has different interests. And maybe someone would be amazing at I know in like some of these bigger firms, you don't do any sort of recruiting new clients and new books of business, but maybe some of the staff would actually, or seniors would be really good at that, and maybe push them more on like the salesman route rather than saying, well, you're not a manager, you're not a senior manager or a partner, so you shouldn't be doing any BD work. It's like, let's see what they want to work on and where they want to be.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, and that does require having an open mind, which is sometimes the more challenging piece. If you've been doing something within a firm for the same way for the last like 25, 30 years, 50
Right.
years even, to all of a sudden shift that mindset can be really challenging. But that's important because, like you said, it not only helps empower others to reach their fullest potential, but it could also help the firm with sales as well.
Right, right. And I think having some sort of trust and sense of common ground whenever you're having these discussions is super important, because you don't want people to be uncomfortable, and you don't want them to be uncomfortable to state only their goals and their dreams. But if they don't want to, become partner, or, like, nothing should be bad. It should, you have like a safe space to discuss this, and promoting those discussions where it's safe and no dreams are crazy, no, wishes and hopes for your future are bad. It's just like, here, like, that's what you actually want to do.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I remember I've never worked in an accounting firm, but one of the positions I had as an accountant was managing it was the catering and sales department for this company that was doing about 300 million a year in revenue. And my department brought in about 10%. And so I managed the accounts receivable. So sending out all the invoices and ensuring that everything was on the back end accurate. And my boss was a CPA, and he was super cool. He had a lot of passions outside of work, and really created an environment where we felt comfortable talking about non-work things, which I'll always be grateful to him for, because in my role, I had to interact and engage with creatives. I mean, most of the people that I worked with were sales and marketing people. And so I had to understand that sometimes the things that they didn't necessarily fit within a box, because sales and marketing doesn't always fit within a box. And one of the things that he suggested that I did to open my mind up to other possibilities within my career was to shadow other people in different accounting departments. So I was an AR, but there's also AP, there's also payroll. And he really pushed for not just me, but everyone that worked with him to spend a day or a few hours with other people within our accounting and finance team to just expose ourselves to what other possibilities there are. So maybe that's something that firms, if they aren't already doing that, or at least really advocating for that, make that a priority so that you can see what else is out there. And in doing so, I found that AR was something that I actually really loved. I loved my role, but that was further enforced by going around to other positions and seeing, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, this is cool, but I actually really like what I do over here. So there's beauty in being able to create an environment where you allow your team to see other aspects of the firm.
Oh, yes, I love that. We at EY, all the staff for 3 years rotate. Like, if you're in tax, I'm not sure about audit, through different groups, which I thought was neat. So you rotate through like international, compliance, state and local tax, all the different areas. And so I would agree with that. I think it's super important to, even if you don't think you're going to like something, you might find out you love it, or you appreciate what you do love even more.
And including in that that rotation, hopefully that includes the consulting side and the business development side, because that's where the creative aspects really come into play and may awaken something within accountants that they didn't know they really wanted to tap into.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think it's really neat now with the ability to work virtually so much, that there might be some places for women to, who want to do these flex hours and not be in the office as much, where could they also, fill in gaps when they're working from home? So maybe that would be, just doing their traditional work from home, or maybe it's helping run educational webinars, or find new businesses that we're going to approach. But it's like there's so many things with the internet and ways that firms can get creative to think about, we don't need to let this person go, and their strengths are in this area. So how can we further utilize them that maybe aren't so traditional?
Yes. Oh my goodness. And that goes right in your wheelbox, Katie, because a part of being able to be remote is having the systems in place to allow your teams to be able to do that through the automation work that you help firms with. And I love that you brought up educational webinars, because that is another way that's another possible revenue stream for a firm that I don't think many have tapped into. Perhaps you have potential clients or prospective clients that aren't quite ready to sign you on as a firm, but they are looking for education and resources to tap into. So that's something that, if you package it and position it correctly, can be something that a remote team member works on, and then you're able to package and sell that to prospective clients.
Totally, totally. Even just with the education, like the service, how can we better serve our clients? A lot of times it's just touching them and being in touch with them. So having Zoom meetings, having extra emails, having just anything that can keep them updated. And it's like, you definitely don't need to be in person for that. So there's so many ways firms can promote women within their culture, keep them on board, whether or not they have families, and start to close this gap between the number of men that are partners and women that are partners.
And why do you think this is so important? I mean, obviously we're women, so we feel we want to see more women reaching the highest level that they want to achieve in their career. But from a firm's perspective, like, why do you feel it's so important for there to be more women represented at the partner level?
So I think that this is for a lot of reasons. For one, it's women and men, we have different characteristics naturally. It's not to say all women are the same, but we offer some characteristics that are typically a little bit softer, and we may make stronger connections with people that, some people relate really well to men and some do to women. And they're really missing out by not having females who, for those people that need, they just naturally connect better to women, they're missing out. And also just really great talent. So if I'm a female and I walk into a firm day one and I don't see any female partners, what does that signal to those people walking in? It starts to close some doors down, starts to make them think, do I belong here long term? So it's not just, we're missing out on talent at the top, but the message that we're sending to the bottom for these females coming in is not good.
Absolutely, because you can only reflect, or what you see reflected is what you know is possible for yourself. So if you don't see yourself reflected in a position that you may be interested in, it makes it that much more challenging to be able to get there. I loved your point about softer skills. I love saying softer skills, and I was interviewing a woman, Erica Lee Harney, who used to be the president of AFWA, the Accounting Financial Women's Association or Alliance. And she calls them savvy skills, that women have savvy skills. And it's so true, whether it's soft or savvy, however we want to call it, but it's a different set of tools that we bring to the table. I know for me, one of my gifts is, as you were saying earlier, was connection. That's something that a lot of women bring to the table, not every woman, but that's a strength for a lot of women. And when I make a connection and I want to stay in touch with that person, maybe it never leads to a business opportunity, but I have this desire to just want to get to know them, help them if I can, at least remain connected to them. And because of that, so many opportunities have come about that I couldn't even have been aware of if I had gone into the situation like solely focused on selling this service, selling this opportunity. And maybe it's a connect or an opportunity that they bring to the table for me, or it's an introduction that they bring that I would never have thought of. And so that's something that I feel a lot of firms are missing out on, is if you're not giving women the space to pursue those types of connections, A, and then B, they're not in a position where they have the freedom to really create a career path or a career that allows them to do that, then the firm is possibly missing out on a lot of opportunities.
Yes, I 100% agree with everything you just said.
Yay. All right. So I think our final question I think we should dive into is, how does, and we touched on a little bit of this already, but I think to really nail it home, what are some things that firms do that continue to perpetuate this lack of female representation at the partner level?
So, not having formal sponsorships is definitely something that contributes to it. And I do want to put this in here. I'm not saying that EY doesn't have one. They probably do at some of those greater levels. It was just my relationship with my counselor wasn't. So I don't know what they have and don't have. I just want to put that in there. But formal sponsorships, definitely, if you don't have one, I think only 12% of firms currently have one. So that's definitely hurting the lack of women partners. Number two is simply the lack of women partners, kind of like we talked about. So the women coming in don't see women partners, and it's discouraging to us. So finding ways to focus on helping women get to that next level. And then I would say number three would be not allowing people to explore their creative gifts. So, like you said, not giving them a place to go out and establish those connections. If that's what they're really, really good at, and you say, well, you really need to be focused on this compliance work, because that's what's bringing us revenue. It's getting the work done, and that's what we're charging our clients for. Maybe if they're great at connections, like you were saying, it might bring in a ton of different business opportunities. So being more flexible in how you view your employees. Not everyone has the same skills, and allowing people to explore those skills, try on different hats, and move in different ways. So maybe they shoot straight up, maybe they go this way and then curve back this way. It's not everyone has the same path and the same timeline.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that, a fourth point is to revisit your parent-friendly policies.
Mm-hmm.
So as a mom, if that is a dream of yours and you know that that's something that you want to experience within this lifetime, that shouldn't mean that you have to sacrifice your career goals as well. Your career goals may shift after you become a mom. However, a firm needs to have policies in place
Mm-hmm.
that allow someone to be a parent and also be able to pursue whatever career goals that may be, which could include being a partner and working more flex hours. And the firm needs to create a system where that is possible.
Yes, totally.
Thank you so much for listening to Katie and I talk about working in a male-dominated field. And now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever encountered or experienced a situation where you felt that you were approaching a glass ceiling, or that your gifts weren't truly valued at the firm that you were working with? Feel free to leave a comment below, and we'd love to learn more about your experience. Thanks again for tuning in.
Thank you.